We're getting close to the end here, folks. Reading Dallas Pimiento, Book 4, Bronco Fury, beginning with a piece called Stage Fritter Arabesque. He took a discipline cultivated over a period of 10 years in the sweatshop of Arcani Harpoon's Academy of Philosophy for Moonwhip to sit there in silence, listening to the television in the waiting room, braying its litany of mediocrities accompanied by the laughter of those around him. Only one person beside himself was not partaking of the laugh-track-enhanced brutality on the screen. It was a woman leafing steadily through a Bible. Moonwhip kept his own eyes on the little book of pictures he had brought with him. He had made this book for just these types of situations. Among the pictures were a George Price cartoon, the elevation of the cross by Rubens, and a photograph of Morgan Freeman re-roofing a house. He wished he had a portable music player that he might block out the sound of the TV. Arcani Harpoon had assured him that if Moonwhip stayed another 10 years at the academy, he could learn to turn off his hearing. But having received word that he must report for a physical, Moonwhip left, and now here he sat, waiting to see the doctor. "Alan Moonwhip," called the woman in the Garfield the cat-patterned scrubs. Finally, Moonwhip involuntarily barked. He clapped a hand over his mouth. What would Harpoon say if he had heard him? After another long wait in the examination room, this one mercifully devoid of television's entertainment bounty, the doctor came in. He looked over Moonwhip for about 5 minutes and pronounced, "Mr. Moonwhip, you're dying." "I know it," Moonwhip nodded. "I hate to be so blunt about it, but—" "What do you mean you know it?" The doctor chewed a tongue depressor thoughtfully. "I've known for some time. Thyroid decrepitude," the Moonwhip sounded bored. "Yes, well, since you know so much," the medical man posited, "what are you doing about it?" "Going about my daily routine as normal, trying to master German literature before I go." "Aren't you watching Jed Domicile, Detective Doctor?" the doctor demanded. "You should have seen it last night." Protein squinting night. Something very like a blackened caraway seed came off the apple that Recknell was eating and onto his tongue. "Yuck, what's that?" he said, removing the tiny object with his finger. He started to wipe it off on the tablecloth, but his dining partner, Fribish, stopped him. "Let me see that," he insisted. Recknell deposited the little black thing on a napkin pushed forward by Fribish. "Fascinating," Fribish commented. "What is it?" Recknell asked, a trifle irritated at this man whom he had met only 20 minutes before. "I believe it's a highly advanced transmitter/receiver, akin to the so-called alien implant spoken of in films and books of late." Fribish's voice became almost a mutter as he held the mystery-laden napkin directly before his eyes. Recknell swallowed and turned his attention to his plate, where there was still an apple and a banana left to be eaten. He exhaled out his nostrils and glanced at the clock. The lunch hour would soon be over. Where was Chris? Just then a hand clapped Recknell on the shoulder. "Did I scare you?" Chris the prankster, his hair held up in an eruption-like state by some powerful new gel, asked as he pulled out a chair. "Where have you been?" Recknell asked, keeping the emotional content of the question rigidly in check. Eating lunch, answered the black-clad fellow. "You don't think I'd eat here, do you?" "Well, I guess we can go then." Recknell picked up his fruit and edged his chair back. Fribish looked up at him and Chris. "Nice to have met you," Recknell forced himself to say. "Are you leaving?" Fribish asked. "Yes." "Oh, well, here is your device." Fribish held out the napkin. The black object lay in the middle like an evicted tick. "No, thanks." Recknell shook his head. "You can keep it." Fribish's eyes grew large. He looked down and back up. "But this was intended for you," he said. "Think of the cosmic consequences if I were to keep it." Towel reverie. Harvesting the doorknobs proved more difficult than Jan and Jeremy had believed. "Don't they make these in factories?" Jan complained as she struggled with a machete for which her city-bred hands were ill-suited. "My Uncle Herbert says the ones from the factories don't have the same aesthetic qualities as the ones that are grown." Jeremy managed to hack in exactly the right way at the husk surrounding the doorknob so that it fell neatly apart, revealing the wet, fresh doorknob inside. "Look at that!" he exclaimed, fishing the doorknob out from the messy mass of fibers. "Beautiful, isn't it?" He held it up for Jan to see. "I can't get mine to come free of the husk without damaging them in some way." Jan looked sourly at the doorknob. "How much longer are we going to have to do this?" she cried, dropping her machete wearily against her leg. "Until your debt to the hotel is repaid," barked a voice that could only belong to a mean person. Jan and Jeremy jumped. Nash's Calibre, now standing before them, rooting among their harvested doorknobs, was the overseer. "You've hardly done anything," he snarled. "One of the native children would have a bushel by now. At this rate, you'll be here through next season." Jan began to cry. "We'll get better at it," Jeremy promised. He said this as much to encourage Jan as to reassure Calibre. The latter only laughed. His laughter was cruel and forced. He laughed in Jeremy's face, and then he laughed in Jan's. As he turned his face to the skies to share his laughter with the sky gods of his mythology, Jan swung her machete through his neck, severing his head. "You managed that well enough," Jeremy was sardonic. Jan burped out one little laugh of her own through her continuing tears. "I wonder if his head contains a doorknob," she croaked. "Well, they don't make heads in factories," Jeremy joked, looking about for a sign that anyone had seen the murder. "Yes, they do." Jan sobbed harder than ever. Tired teeth. The probe entered the still black waters of the rectangular reservoir, making hardly a ripple on the surface. So slowly did it do so. As an invited guest of the survey team, I had been allowed to push the button that launched the probe and to steer it on its way. "Excellent control, Dallas," remarked Hans Flowicki, the chief surveyor. "Well, you know I have an aptitude for these things," I smirked. "What things?" Mina Ableton, a grad student from Blockage College, asked. I could only assume she was envious and resented my presence among the team. She had been nasty to me ever since I arrived, film crew in tow. "Things involving buttons and wheels," I emphasized each word, turning a leering face towards her. "Keep your eyes on the screen, Dallas," Flowicki directed. He sounded worried. "I need more self-reflection," I noted as I obeyed Flowicki. It was true. I had come to the realization just at that moment that I needed to spend some time correlating the fictitious me with the real me to see what could be learned. I still feel that this should be done, even as I write this down some incalculable number of years later. "You've lost the probe," Mina shrieked. "No, I haven't," I drawled. "It's been eaten," Flowicki theorized, though he sounded so sure. "I guess you'll have to go into the reservoir and get it out," Mina pointed at the silent, creepy water. "You're crazy. Do you know that?" I asked seriously. "That's the usual procedure," Flowicki confirmed. "What are you afraid of?" Mina demanded. "You're known for doing all kinds of dangerous stuff, having all kinds of adventures. That's why you're invited to be a part of this survey team, even though you have no qualifications and no reason for being here. Why don't you do it?" Her little cornrow-type knobs of hair quivered with each jerk of her head. "Because just at this moment I realized that that's not really me," I said quietly. "It would be good for the film, Dallas," my director suggested tentatively. I looked back at him and sighed. The stuff people watch. 212 peanuts lay in various states of wholeness at the bottom of my trunk. Odd, I thought. I don't really eat peanuts anymore. Nor do I use a trunk. I sighed. But these sorts of things do happen in life. You find yourself the possessor of items that have no relation to you, nor any bearing on your... I held my hand out vertically, snapping it up and down as if directing someone down a narrow alleyway. "Goal?" my wife suggested. How did you know I was thinking that? I asked, shocked at yet one more proof of our compatibility. "You were talking aloud," she informed me, returning her attention to sewing a button on our son's trousers. If only they were trousers, I wished. "All he wears are jeans." "Then call them jeans," she said, sewing the button on with the secure method she had learned in home economics class. "Only they don't want it called home economics class anymore, do they? It's called... what do they call it now? Why are you jumping from one thing to another?" My wife folded the jeans neatly and laid them on the arm of the sofa. "Conversationally, you mean?" I noticed, proudly, as I am right in doing so in such a manner, that she had lost weight. "I guess it's because at the same time, my mind is jumping ahead, taking the conversation off on tangents. I think you're getting senile." Her mind was a closed door to me. Dare I interpose mentally upon her? Put her thoughts as remotely as UN food distribution sites in the goddamn tropics? "For your information," I said, "this motion," I did the hand thing again, "was intended to accompany the words, 'my mission,' instead of what?" Why was she humoring me today? Normally the conversation wouldn't have gotten as far as this before being shut down. "Well, you said goal. There's a difference. I think you need to talk to your doctor about your memory." The bull potato. Negative reactions to the new paintings on display in the soon-to-be defunct coffeehouse Winter Sky did not depress me, although they were specifically designed to accompany the coffee-drinking experience, while at the same time challenge one's habituated thoughts on what is frankly an addiction. I seem to have forgotten exactly the point I was going to make, both to the coffeehouse patrons and to you, the idealized reader of this torturous sentence. But they're not even my paintings, I defended myself. What's the difference between a coffee house and a coffee shop? My daughter asked as we exited the establishment to the telepathic woos of students and professors alike. It's a matter of conversation, I explained, but did not elaborate. A coffee house is a place where people drink coffee and talk. A coffee shop is just a place to buy coffee, I elaborated, but did not explain. It's a matter of perception. And commerce, I added cryptically. You called that place a coffee house, my daughter continued. Did I? Well, it is, compared to the Starbucks next door. But people talk in Starbucks too. Oh, God, just drop it. I was unnecessarily rude. A pace or two later, I tried to mitigate my rudeness. A lot of the time, I don't know what I'm saying. Like earlier, when I made the coffee house or shop statement, when I snapped at you just then, and right now when I'm rambling on about nothing. Mom says you're going senile. Mom is right, but don't tell her I told you that. One's identity is essentially one's memory. As one gets old and begins forgetting things like what I was going to do immediately upon rising from this chair, although it has happened all one's life, if one but realized it, is more galling as an adult rapidly approaching middle age, not just because of the fear of encroaching senility, Alzheimer's be damned, but because of the loss of one's self. I feel like there was a greater point I was going to make, but I seem to have... Yes, you guessed it. Stethoscopic hedgehog medallion. Little Karen put her resealable lunch container into the microwave oven and pushed the button indicating a cooking time of 4 minutes. I like my food hot, she explained to the mechanical woman she was showing around the factory that day. The sound of the oven's innards tumbling over and over like pebbles in a can was a reassuring one to little Karen. I make a noise like that when I am diseased, the mechanical woman said. Really? Little Karen replied idly. While she waited for her food to be sufficiently reheated, she showed her companion how she got napkins and a plastic spork. That is a runcible spoon, the mechanical woman, whose name, if anyone had taken the time to find out, was Doris, pointed a finger of black neoprene and declared. No, little Karen corrected. See, it's not a spoon. It has little teeth on it like a fork. That's why we call it a spork, because it's half spoon and half fork. You get it? It is a runcible spoon invented in the 1820s for eating grapefruit. Although the original utensil was made of a silver alloy, not plastic, the basic design remains the same. Dora spoke with a charming monotone that made her pedantic bent easier to take. Well, I never knew all that, Karen said uncertainly. She hid the functional end of her spork in her fist to keep it from being the subject of any further discussion. What now? Doris asked. Well, while I'm waiting, I usually watch TV. Little Karen gestured at the box mounted on the wall. Doris moved on her chain-driven roller skates before the screen. Good times, she announced. This episode was first broadcast October 22nd, 1975. It is a good one. JJ finally shows the world what a mean bully his father is. The microwave oven beeped its message of completion. Your food is ready. I hope you like it with dangerous carcinogens because they are now intermingled with it. Doris's olfactory systems recognized the odor. Referential young imp. The thoroughly soaked cards bore the images of the 27 principal executives of Fledge Weller Motors as well as the 13 chief designers. For a total of 40, Aldo said at the behest of some internal prodding that he never fully understood. Then why are there only 39, asked Prugy, his freckled nose wrinkling in perpetual dismissal. Probably a two are stuck together. It rained pretty hard, you know. Aldo hunted for the anomaly. What are you two boys doing? Edna Ray's head and the abnormally diminutive shoulders appeared above the edge of the roof. Jesus, you scared me, Aldo shouted. She didn't scare me, Prugy denied it. You need to let those cards dry, advised Edna May. You need to get them separated first, Aldo growled, still upset about being scared while 30 feet in the air. No, you don't, Edna Ray grinned, because I've got the missing one. She held up a card briefly to Aldo's astonished gaze before dropping out of sight. Aldo bellowed in fury, crawling as quickly and as close to the edge as he dared. Edna Ray, he cried. Relax, will you? Prugy was disgusted. He had suspected that visiting Aldo would be a bore, and he had been right. How do you get down from here? Let me get the rest of the cards first, Aldo begged. No, I think I want to leave now. You mean go home? Yeah, Prugy answered. Don't think this hasn't been fun, because I wouldn't want the truth interfering with your fantasy life, but I really have to go. I was going to give you these cards, Aldo lied. That's okay. Prugy moved like a crab to the roof edge. How do I get down, he asked. Again. Downstairs, Edna Ray laid the John Birkenstrauss card between two hand towels and put a book on top of them. He was the one mainly responsible for the 1961 glow frog, she told her parakeet. Truth Aper Compound. The following conversation took place in the basement of an out-of-business McDonald's. The persons involved were hiding from the giant hat terrorizing the area at the time. Who's the drummer? Larson asked. The three men were listening to a Sonny Simmons album, reluctantly on the part of two of them. Only Chester had had the forethought to bring any music. The stuff he had brought, however, was jazz, unpalatable for men whose hearts had been molded by Foreigner and 38 Special. Cindy Blackman, Chester told him. Good name, Larson grinned. She used to play with Stan Getz, Chester added. Both Larson and the third man, Darrell, looked blankly at their comrade. He was a saxophone player, Chester educated them. I saw her play with him on the Tonight Show once. She was phenomenal. The Tonight Show with Jay Leno? Darrell asked. No, with Johnny Carson. Oh, Darrell looked downcast. Jay Leno's got a big car collection, Larson said to Darrell. Yeah, motorcycles, too. Do you mean a big collection of cars, Chester asked, or a collection of big cars? I mean a big collection. Larson sounded borderline hostile. Oh, it's just the way you said it. It sounded like... Chester drifted away into silence in his own thoughts. I wonder if the gas is still turned on in this place, Larson wondered, looking up at the pipes overhead. How do you know it's gas and not electricity? Asked Darrell. Well, I used to work... His words were drowned out by the sound of concrete and wood being wrenched apart. The giant hat, using its thick tentacles like wrecking balls, was tearing open the building in its hunt for the three men who had dealt it such a humiliating setback hours earlier. I deserve a break today, roared the basso profundo voice. Magic amputee. Pause it while I get a sip of tea. Magic amputee. Flying, thought Rose Maroon, was more fun than she had expected. At least one of the puppets dangling by cords from her harness would have tried to convince her that the proper grammatical construction of her thought was more nearly fun, had she had the appropriate puppet on her hand at the time, and had she made her thoughts known by speaking it aloud. That is certainly too many variables with which to start such a simple story of a woman falling out of the sky, so we will proceed directly to the part where, one by one, Rose Maroon puppet companions were severed from her by means of a box cutter wielded by none other than Dyrus, the Sky Menace. On the ground below, Mr. and Mrs. Throat held onto their cow, he in the front, she in the back, as they watched Rose Maroon plummet towards a painful collision with said ground. Darn that Dyrus, Mr. Trough-Throat mumbled with feeling. She thought she was flying, poor thing. Mrs. Trough-Throat shook her head sadly. The cow, Meyerbeer, lacking both vocal cords, could only moo with a special pitch that meant something like, that must be a common delusion to those who suddenly find themselves in midair. Reckon she'll hit the silo? Mr. Trough-Throat asked his wife. Hard to tell without a protractor and a slide rule handy, the weathered old woman replied. In the event, Rose Maroon did not hit the silo. She landed on the other side of the hill that served for a horizon in this area. Dyrus the Sky Menace removed his grimy flying backpack apparatus, and cursed with familiarity the foiling of his planned destruction of the Trough-Throat silo. It's too phallic, he explained to his brother Grodin, his mechanic and sidekick, after the latter had asked why Dyrus wanted the silo destroyed. And to be bombed with a female, Dyrus explained maniacally. Oh, that would be a fitting means of destruction. I found this. Grodin held up one of the maroon woman's puppets. It was a little boy. What do you want to do with it? We'll keep it as a souvenir on this botched job, Dyrus said, taking the puppet and putting it on. He laughed as it tried to bite him. Sterility Galoot. Apart from the man in the apron standing by the cauldron stirring the beans every other minute, no one was within sight of Gros Michel, the goat hiding in the trailer. With Gros Michel was Cajun Red, who lived inside a small black and white TV set. Anybody else? Cajun Red did not need to whisper. His volume was turned low. No, just the guy in the apron. Gros Michel kept his bray down to a hoarse grunt. The trailer was only a dozen paces from the cauldron. The goat and the centipede-like creature pacing nervously behind the screen had no way of knowing it, but around the trailer and the man stirring the beans was a flat, empty landscape that extended to the horizon and, as far as you know, beyond. Tell me, Cajun Red asked, do you think you could take him in a fight? Hard to say, Gross Michelle said after a moment's deliberation. What if he threw those hot beans on me? What does this apron say? What do you mean, say? Does the apron have anything printed on it? Cajun Red snapped the digits on one of the hands these people called their snappers. No words. Gross Michelle peered through the gap in the curtains again. Just a picture of a naked woman in a chef's hat. The goat turned away from the window. He looked about the tiny trailer. Apparently some actor had recently used it. There was a pile of scripts on the table. Would they be good to eat? Are you hungry? He asked Cajun Red. Starving, came the answer, but until I make contact with my people, I can't receive the electronic impulses that create food here in my televisual void. This one looks good. Gross Michelle selected one of the strips. Locker in Trident, he read the title aloud. Better read it first, Cajun Red advised. Why? Asked the goat as he extended an exploratory tongue. If it's inconclusive, it might not set well with you. Locker in Trident. As envisioned by the director, Lord Failing, the film would open upon the bloodshot eyes of the nominal villain, Pinstripe Weasel, with a roll of drums announcing the beginning of the classic rock song that accompanies the slow pullback of the camera. Pinstripe Weasel slowly lifts his weary, tousled head from the surface of the coffee table and looks about at the chaos of his living room, testimony to his Herculean labors of the past month. He's tired, Lord Failing explained. Everybody's tired. His efforts at living life to the fullest have left him drained. So he does a lot of drugs, Todd Murphy surmised succinctly. Well, I think it's implied that drug use is tolerated, maybe even rampant. Lord Failing rolled his hand, allowing it to fly into the air. Look, I'll be blunt, Murphy ran his palms down his thighs. I want to play a really flipped-out druggie. There has to be mass consumption in this film, or I just don't see how I can do it. He glanced at his manager, Scorby Dude. Todd's willing to do the film for considerably less than a star of his caliber is worth just to do the kind of part that he has envisioned, Dude stepped in. I understand your desire, Lord Failing spoke with emotion, but I don't want to turn this into some kind of fear and loathing. And I read the book on which this script is based, Murphy interrupted, placing particular emphasis on the fact that he had actually taken the time to read something he didn't absolutely have to. And the drug use isn't implied, it's there, in black and white. Lord Failing wondered why Murphy was so keen to play a druggie. Had he not been privy to a conversation the actor had had with his manager the day before? If I get a reputation as a doper actor by playing these kinds of parts, Murphy explained, then I'll get all the drugs I want free, and all the women that want drugs too, he smiled slyly. But Todd, as a movie star, you can already, Dude began to object. Oh, not the hard stuff, you understand, Murphy interjected. Just psychedelics.